Welcome back to Moms Like Me, powered by Support Now. I am so excited for today's conversation where we're really going to be focusing on all things NICU. NICU is one of the most common, tough times that we come across here at Support Now. And we know that while these things are not as common, they're also not so uncommon. And so one of the things we always strive to do in conversations like this is to really unpack what's happening in the NICU, how families, particularly moms, might be doing when they have a child in the NICU, and perhaps even when they're transitioning back home. And so today I'm joined by NICU expert, a NICU transport nurse, an assistant nurse manager, Tia Miller. So Tia, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So we will learn all about Tia's background here shortly, but I'd love for you to start by giving everyone a little bit of history on what got you into the NICU and what you do now.
I never thought that I was going to be a nurse. I always start my story out that way because I feel like a lot of people refer to like nursing as a calling or something that you're born just knowing that you're going to be doing. But I thought I was going to be a journalist for the longest time. So when I was in high school, we had the unfortunate event of where we lost my baby brother. So that kind of drove me into a healthcare career, and the L&D nurses that interacted with my family during that entire experience were so great. And that was when I knew that I wanted to be able to offer like the kind of comfort that they gave to my family to other families. Obviously, I'm not an L&D nurse today because while I was going through school during my L&D clinical, my very first day there, my patient had experienced a loss. And to me, that was like, this is why I'm here. This is the reason I got into this. But the entire time, I just felt really helpless. And like, I needed to be the person who had their hands in the bed on the baby, giving them their best chance at life. So from there, it was a quick hop over to the NICU. And once I spent one day there, that's all it took to get me one track onto the NICU from that moment forward. I did have to do a quick 2-year stopover in adults when I graduated, but I'm never going back.
So tell me a little bit more. What's your experience been working with NICU families?
It's been a learning process, that's for certain. I do feel like having had my own experiences, it did bring me in with like this built-in layer of like a little bit of understanding and empathy for their situations. But what we don't realize is that when people go through things, they react in such different ways. It's everyone's journey is a little bit different in that sense, and learning how to support people differently has been one of the most interesting but rewarding challenges because they don't always relate to each other. Parents who are there with acute full-term infants versus parents who are there with premature infants, they do have some level of relation, but they're going to go through different obstacles. So as nurses, we have to recognize that our support isn't one size fits all, right? There's so many different things that we can advocate for or do for these parents that might necessarily be different from day to day.
And talk to me a little bit more. You had told me in a previous conversation that you are a NICU transport nurse. What is that?
So essentially, I work in my region's level 4 NICU. So for about a 2.5 to 3 hour radius, we are the level 4 NICU. And what that means is that sometimes when babies are born at outlying hospitals or smaller community hospitals and they need a higher level of care, I, as the transport nurse, will go out in the ambulance to pick up those babies and bring them back to my unit. So it's a lot of emergency medicine, stabilizing. I had to learn a lot of skills that a normal bedside nurse wouldn't need to know. So for instance, I am capable of intubating babies. I can put in umbilical lines, and I could perform a thoracentesis if there was a pneumothorax. So things like that.
And out of curiosity, is that something that you pursued or you asked to do that? Or did you volunteer to do this? Because it definitely feels like a level, I wouldn't say above, but it definitely feels like the trauma level is certainly heightened.
Yes. So when I came to the NICU, I had no idea that this sort of nursing existed. But I saw other nurses on my unit that did it. And I was kind of like, that's what I want to do. I want to be exactly like them. They were always like the go-to people whenever you needed anything on the unit. And I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. So I kind of put myself under their wing and just went to them, tried to make myself the person that was available for other people to go to. And eventually, after I had been in my NICU for about 5 years, my assistant nurse manager had come to me and was like, "You're ready. It's time for you to apply." So she really kind of gave me like the kick in the butt to realize that I was at the point where I could do it.
And so for those that, again, can't or having a hard time envisioning this type of thing, is this a situation where you arrive at a home or wherever the family or the mom is and everyone is in the ambulance with you? Like describe it like a little bit more like what this looks and feels like.
Yeah, so this would be myself, my respiratory therapist partner, and our EMT arriving to the hospital or unit that has called us to come for a baby. And once we get there, we perform our assessment. We'll do any interventions that we need to stabilize the infant. And after that, I'll go in and I'll speak to the parents myself. I need to get their consent, but also they want to know what's going on. They want an update. This is not something in the vast majority of cases they ever expected to happen. So it's a very emotional experience for a lot of them. And unfortunately, because of the size of our ambulance and the size of the incubator that we take our babies in, we can't take parents with us. So a lot of the time, as I'm talking to them, I'll tell them, we're going to bring them in. You're going to get to see them. But unfortunately, after that, we'll have to go. And then it's up to the L&D, the postpartum unit that they're in currently, to try and get them transferred over to our hospital so that they can be closer. But it is a separation. And it's always
Wow.
it's always very difficult.
So you're really having to not just play the role of taking care of the baby and getting the baby to this, this level 4 hospital. You're also having to communicate and be this intermediary with the family to explain to them what this process is going to really be like for them. And it sounds like in most cases they're not anticipating something like this.
They always want to know what's next, and at that point, it's always so difficult to tell. So I can give them an idea of what it's going to look like when baby gets back. But a lot of things will still be up in the air. The most that I can do after speaking to them and leaving that hospital is try and keep as best open communication as I can. I always call them immediately as soon as we get back to let them know that we made it safely, how they tolerated it, and like what the next steps will be for them. But it's a challenge for a lot of parents to even just having those conversations, because they just went from having birth or giving birth to finding out that their child is critically ill and that they have to be separated from them. So a lot of the stuff that I'm saying to them as well, it's going to be extremely hard for them to absorb in that moment. So it's really picking out the important pieces of information and things that they can hold on to that I know that are going to get them through how the 20 minutes, 45 minutes, 2.5 hours that it's going to take before they hear back from me that we got back to the hospital.
Wow, what a difficult position to be in because, again, emotions are heightened, particularly the mom who is naturally very hormonal, emotional, and now having to part with their baby with essentially a stranger. And so you're having to very quickly build trust. how are some of the ways you try to do that?
So being honest is always going to be the best policy, even when it's really difficult. I never go into a room and immediately tell them like, "Hey, everything is great. Don't worry." I want them to know every detail of what I found in my assessment, and what I'm going to do about it and route to the hospital so that they understand that I have a plan, and the things that I am most concerned about. I always want to leave them with the idea that I am really good at my job and I'm going to do the absolute best for their baby. And just letting them know that, yes, this is a really scary moment. Um, but I'm going to take really good care of your baby. And I'm going to let you know as soon as I get back and anything that needed to happen in the interim.
It's always so striking. I feel like nurses, you all really have the hardest conversations in some ways because you're setting the stage in a way that a doctor yet hasn't yet done or may not do at all. So you really play this dual medical and almost like not therapist role, but you are like a communication vessel back to the family. So I'm curious, in your experience, what's the best way for a family to partner with you so that they can get the most out of the experience and the relationship with you, knowing that, again, you're operating with not a lot of information, but some, and trying to create as the best outcomes possible.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to having really good communication and understanding. Even as a staff nurse on the unit, outside of my transport role, taking care of babies on the unit, the best way to support parents is understanding how best they communicate and what things are the most important for them. Taking transport out of the equation, some things that we hear frequently from parents that may have increased how traumatic their NICU stay was for them is some of the things that they think are so important. Other people might not necessarily think that immediately. So things like the first time their infant gets to wear clothing or the first time their baby gets bathed, those things kind of seem small sometimes, especially if you're the nurse and you're doing something maybe as a surprise for parents. But those things are so important to them, and for some parents that really kind of like makes or breaks their relationship with their nursing staff. So just really trying to keep that communication good and being upfront and saying, I want to be on the same page as you. So what do you expect from me? What can I do to make things a little less scary for you? Trying to do as good as we can on following up on those.
So, oh gosh, that sounds just so challenging in so many ways. Just given the emotional state of how the family is feeling. One of the things, as you know, that I love talking about is support, and so you're providing a level of support to the family. And it sounds like you do a great job of centering that support, not just around the baby, but really for everyone involved, to make them feel involved, to make them feel that they're being heard, to make them feel like they have a voice, which I think is so important. And I'm also curious from your experience, what are some of the maybe unsaid things that parents need support with that you think supporters or their community might be able to offer, particularly in those early days where the unknowns are very, very scary and uncertain?
When we think about like the kind of strains that a NICU admission puts on them, we think like physical, financial. I think we forget a lot about like the social isolation that comes with it as well. Some of our parents will spend around the clock 24/7 at the bedside, and asking for help isn't easy for a lot of people. Things that other people could do to support parents would be things like offering to clean their house for them while they're at the hospital or walk their dogs, or something like packing lunches for their other school-age children or something. I know not everyone has, like, finances to be able to donate money, but something like coming and taking them out for lunch or to dinner or something at a place that's, like, relatively close to the hospital, so they still feel like they're close enough, but they get out of that constant beeping and overstimulation, things like that. We really take for granted, like, the saying is that it takes a village, and it really does, and our parents, they are part of our patients.
That's great advice, and I think, again, those are some of the things. Support doesn't have to cost money. Sometimes it's really as simple as taking the most mundane things off of the parent's mind. And I think you also bring up a really interesting point that I'd love for you to provide more context on. Of one of the terms I've become familiar with is this concept of decision fatigue, which is that families and parents, particularly those that are in the NICU, they don't know what they need. So it becomes really, really hard for moms and dads to be able to communicate that. Have you seen that firsthand, even as from a nurse point of view?
I've actually had a conversation with a family about this once, and they were like, "I just wish people would stop asking, like, what do we need?" Or stop asking, like, "Is there anything that I can do for you?" Like, I don't know. I don't know what you could do for me. In that moment, there's so many things going on. Just the recognition when people are struggling, the ability to, like, hold space for them, telling them that you are there for them, not necessarily asking them questions all of the time about things that they might need, or just doing things for them, as opposed to making them decide.
Yeah, so just like being proactive.
Yes.
And then too, but for you, do you find that even when you're presenting options for parents, do you even have to reframe questions in a way that becomes easier for them to answer? Because this decision fatigue, part of what I would imagine the decision fatigue is coming from isn't just because a million people are reaching out asking how they can help, but it's also the decisions they're making in the hospital for their baby in a critical state. So I'm curious, like, what tactics have you learned to kind of get a response out of the parents so that you can do what's in their what they're preferring, even if they're having a hard time articulating it?
They're making these, like, high impact decisions all the time. So sometimes even questions that we ask them that are of less, we'll say, like, critical nature can feel kind of daunting for them when they've already made all these decisions all the time. I think just reassuring them that if they don't want to make a decision, they don't have to do it right now. If they would like to talk out whatever the options are, we're happy to always have conversations with them about that, and letting them kind of lean on us when it comes to, like, education in those matters, not making them make those decisions right away. And always the reminder that they're their baby's parent and they're going to make the best decisions for them no matter what, and we'll always be there for them.
I just think that point is so, you made a really special point there around, you don't have to have an answer right now. I'm sure certain decisions they do, but in general, when you're talking to someone that's going through a level of trauma, the expectation isn't that they're going to have a response in that moment, right? Sometimes you need to give someone time to process and think through, what their needs are, or what their preference truly is. And I think that's a really subtle but important piece of advice for really anyone that's trying to support someone going through any level of trauma, whether it's their baby in the NICU or someone they love in the hospital, maybe even someone who's passed away. And so it's being gentle with those timelines, because timelines and creating urgency when you're not ready for that, my guess, would lead to people just completely shutting down.
It can be difficult. And I think as nurses, it's a good reminder for us that our families, they are part of the patient for us, but they're also individual people. They're not just this baby's parent. They're Jordan, they're Tia, they're Matt. These are individual people, and when they when we come in there, it doesn't always have to be about NICU. It doesn't have to be everything that we talk about. We can give them some sort of normalcy too.
I mean, I'm still blown away that you moved away from labor and delivery due to a circumstance that really jolted you emotionally, and I think you moved into something that may be even more emotionally jolting. Although I'm sure I don't live your day to day, but how do you recommend people like yourself, NICU nurses? How do you support yourself in going through and seeing these hard things day after day after day?
It's always difficult, especially because when you think about it, like this compassion fatigue, this kind of exhaustion that comes with it, it's kind of like a workplace hazard. Like, we run towards the danger. We see these traumatic things every day in our work life. So it's so important for us to be able to take care of ourselves. And I do, on my unit, I teach our new nurses like this little mental health mini series. And for them, I always reiterate boundaries. Boundaries are so important, in that self-care isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. We need it to get by. You have to take those times to just breathe and ground yourself in things that you enjoy and that bring you peace. And always coming back to the idea of the good that you're doing every day and making sure that that's really resonating with you, because every single day that we go on the unit, it might not go exactly our way. Some things happen during the day that really change how your shift goes for you, but recognizing that everything that you do every day when you go into work has this positive outcome for these babies and these families, and what you're doing truly matters in the end, and letting that be the thing that kind of like helps you through on those days when it's not so positive looking.
For me, this conversation just highlights the importance of the relationship between parents and nurses, or really just patients and nurses in general. You really are on the front lines. And I would imagine there's a lot of pressure, because in some ways, not entirely, nurses and the relationships they have with families are really going to be the impression that families remember. And that can be positive and that can be not so positive at times. And so, in addition to trying to give, in this case, the baby the best care possible, I'd imagine there's this kind of lingering fear that they are going to remember their entire experience based off of how they are treated. And again, you're operating in very, very treacherous waters here. Your people are not thinking straight. It's very hard for people to feel optimistic, and yet you're delivering news that might not be the news they want to hear. And so I'm sure that sometimes it feels like a can't win situation, even if you're doing the right things. And so first of all, I just want to say thank you for what you all do to provide the best care to families, particularly those in the NICU, which is just such a difficult time for parents everywhere.
You're very kind for saying that.
It's got to be hard. I'm just being honest. I mean, I have 3 babies myself, and never at once was in the NICU, but I remember not thinking straight, and nurses would come in and out of my room, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't really want to talk to you right now. And so I can't really imagine what it must feel like to be dealing with and working with parents that just aren't in a strong emotional state, and trying to create as effective and as optimal experience as you possibly can give them.
Yeah. And I will say nursing is definitely the hardest job that I've ever loved. To your point, a lot of times when we get these admissions, like, you're right, there's so much going through these parents' heads. Even when I go out on transport, of course, I know that they're not going to remember a ton of stuff that like they learn or that happens that day. But it's so important to remember that like they remember what they feel. So like as nurses, we give them a lot of education at the bedside, right? And it also goes back to that point of like, they're not just patients, they're the people. So if you can do one thing to connect with them and make them feel like you see them as a person in that moment, they're going to take that with them, and that's going to be something that's a highlight of their journey. And as nurses, we can do that for people. We can make this a connection between the two of us.
And I really love what you said earlier that I'm still thinking and processing, which is this idea that the mom or the dad you're talking to, yes, they are the mom and the dad of that baby, but they are also an individual. They are a human, they are a person. They play many, many roles in their life, and they're trying to make sense of it all. And so I think just even that reframe of not just looking at them as, hey, mom, hey, dad, here's your decision for today, or here's the update, but, hey, Jordan, hey, Tia, understanding kind of how they operate as just a person is such a really special gift to be able to step back, because I would imagine that you're also trying to evaluate it as, how would I want to be treated if I was in this situation?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of times I think like it's true, like your day would be a whole lot easier if you just did things the way you wanted to and you just went about it. But honestly, your day might be easier and you might be getting your tasks done and things done, but you're not making those connections. And that's really what we got into nursing for, right? Like we wanted to help people. We wanted to help people. It's not just tasks and a checklist. It's meeting people where they're at and being able to provide that support for them.
I love it. I love it. And Tia, for those that want to meet you online and learn more about you and see more of the tips that you give, where can they find you and resources related?
Yes. So I am that nurse Tia on TikTok and Instagram, and we've built a community of over 20,000. Just as of November, we hit that milestone of nurses and aspiring nurses and NICU parents. And it's a community where we can have a little bit of a laugh. We can find some humor and some lightness in the NICU and just have some education and be there and support each other. So if you're looking for me, that's where I'll be.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tia. And for anyone listening who has a friend or family member who might have a baby in the NICU or leaving the hospital soon, please consider Support Now for your community support needs. I mean, so much of what Tia touched on earlier today around kind of those mundane things, the things that don't cost money, that is like very much in the spirit of why we have built the platform the way we have, and a more opportunistic, or rather a more inclusive way of bringing together all the ways that people want to show up and want to support you, and kind of making that a little less awkward by facilitating a space where people can raise their hand to do those things. And so it felt appropriate to make sure people know that this resource is available for free. And we love, love, love working with NICU families. We know that they are in a really difficult time, and we also want to represent some level of order in a time that feels very chaotic. So Tia, thank you so much for just your perspective. I hope that everyone can be blessed enough to interact with a nurse that has such a great bedside manner and such knowledge and such care, which you clearly demonstrated today. So thank you, and look forward to chatting again.
Thanks for having me.